So it's my pleasure to introduce the panel 4, New Methods and Materials Between Art and Archive, chaired by Magdalena Baran-Szołtys. Magdalena holds a PhD in Literature and Cultural Studies. For her current postdoc project, Stories of and in Transformation, Transformations and Ungleichheitsnarrative in Postsozialistischen Polen at the Research Center for the History of Transformations and the Institute for Contemporary History at Vienna University, she received a Hertha Fernbeck Fellowship from the FWF, the main Austrian funding source. Her doctoral studies were undertaken at the Interdisciplinary PhD Kollegium des Österreichische Galizien und sein multikulturelles Erbe, Austrian Galicia and its multicultural heritage at Vienna University. She was a visiting scholar at the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute and has taught German language courses as well as courses on literature at the University of Sydney. She's a project collaborator for the multinational Eastern Galicia in the interwar Polish discourse and its selected counter-discourses project at the Department of Modern and Contemporary Literature at Warsaw University. She also just has a book that came out this year, Galizien als Archiv, Reisen im postgalizischen Raum in der Gegenwartsliteratur, Galicia as Archive, Travel in Post-Galician Space in the Contemporary Literature would be my spontaneous translation. Sounds very interesting, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Thank you for inviting me to chair this panel. I'm very happy to do that. That's the second panel of the second day of the conference. We are running a little bit late, but I hope we will manage to finish at 1 o'clock, that we have a 1-hour lunch break to take a break a little bit. So the panel has the title New Methods and Materials Between Art and Archive, and thus already gives us a good insight into what it will be about. So we are now living the strict framework of what we understand as traditional archives and heading down new paths. This will be seen not only in the topics of the presentations, but also in the panel participants, since we have not only scholars, but also artists presenting. So I'm happy to introduce the first two speakers, Anna Bochkova and Valerie Habsburg, who will speak about the topic Bitter Paradiso und Paradiso Amaro. Anna Bochkova is a visual artist based in Vienna and Hamburg. She studied in Moscow, Vienna, and in Hamburg, and works mostly on sculptural with the focus on space and dramaturgy within the space. With these narratives, Bochkova reflects the themes like memory, solidarity, migration, society, and its structure. She already had a lot of solo and also group shows in different countries and cities, among others in Kunstraum Lakeside, in Klagenfurt, Austria, in Exile Gallery in Vienna, or in the Kunstverein Harburger Bahnhof in Hamburg. Valerie Habsburg is also an artist and lecturer at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, Akademie der Bildenden Künste, and lives and works in Vienna as well. In her work, she reflects themes like memory, time, and temporality, and the relation to space and place. The archive is an important basis for her artistic work, which we find in form of media, photography, video objects, and installation. Also, Valerie had a lot of shows internationally, among others at Industria Gallery in Brno, in Czech Republic, at the Biennale for Contemporary Photography in Mannheim, Germany, or at the Arte Laguna, Venice, in Italy. So, Anna and Valerie, I hope you are there online, and the floor is yours.
So, can you hear me? I hope everything works well. Thank you for the introduction. We are very happy that you are listening to us today and that we can present our artistic research project Un Paradiso Amaro, Bitter Paradise. Also, we want to thank you to be here. Now I would like to hand over to my colleague Anna Bochkova, and I will start the screen sharing.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you very much for being here. It's a big honor for me and for us to be able to present our project. So on Paradiso Amaro, Beta Paradise is about the life and estate of the Jewish artist Teresa Fyodorovna Ries. She was born in Budapest in 1866 and died in Lugano, Paradiso in her Swiss exile in 1956. The story of Teresa Fyodorovna Ries' life, pain and suffering is a very sad one and yet a very precious for all of us. It is important to oppose forgetting and to make it visible. As a young woman, Teresa Fyodorovna Ries came to Vienna and having studied briefly at the academy in Moscow before, she wanted to study sculpture in Vienna, the city of her dreams. At that time, it was not yet possible for women to study as a regular student at the academy, and so she applied as a private student with Professor Edmund Helmer. It was not possible until 1920-1921 that women were admitted to study at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. Teresa Fyodorovna Ries was a famous artist at the turn of the last century and exhibited at the Secession, the Künstlerhaus in London, Paris, Venice, or Rome. Her works were shown at a World Exhibition in Paris, where she was the first and only woman to receive the gold medal at the first biennales in Venice and also, for example, in the Glass Palace in Munich. But the Glass Palace in Munich no longer stands, it burned down. So now I pass my word to Valerie. Valerie, we cannot hear you.
Okay, so now you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So I will restart. Her work and her life were forgotten in history, or were made forgotten. This fact is of great importance for our project, because it shows the story of a woman, a Jewish artist, and also it is a story exemplary for many others. From an artist perspective and also female art history perspective, Teresa Fyodorovna Ries is so important because we have to work on telling stories of female artists, because art history is mostly written from a male perspective during times. There are more different important aspects of this project for us, which ways we are following. Also, we want to correct and to rewrite the history of her. There are some written comments on her, and you can still find her in books or catalogs today. But for us, now it's possible at the first time to do these corrections, like, for example, to tell something about her correct birth date and birthplace, which is mostly written wrong. Teresa Fyodorovna Ries lived in Vienna until about 1941 and was able to flee late. She was already housed in a collective flat, but didn't want to leave Vienna or to give up her studio and her works. Until the end, she tried to care of the whereabouts and preservation of her works. From her autobiography, which she published herself early in 1980, it is clear now how important her works, her art, and her life as an artist were to her. She regarded her works as the children of her soul. So now we would like to show you a few of her works. Many of her works have disappeared, were vanished, or have been destroyed by the National Socialists. And in some cases, only photographs have survived. Her studio was cleaned by the National Socialists. So here you can see one of her most famous artworks. It's called The Witch, or Die Hexe bei der Toilette zur Walpurgisnacht. The St. Barbara, Mrs. Marie Trebitsch. Die Lampenträgerin, The Sonnenambule. the death, on the left side, the soul returns to God, the kiss, Eve, and Mrs. Lisa Goodherz. There are only some examples where photographies are left from her works. So, Anna, can you go on? Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Our project started in 2018 at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, where the autobiographical book of Teresa Ries, The Language of the Stone, is in the library. Only few of these books are left today. During the photographic and cinematic research for clues, we were able to make the first shaky pictures of still preserved works of art. At the same time, Valerie Habsburg began very intense researching and found on the internet a Russian auction house in Monaco where the private estate of Teresa Fyodorovna Ries was auctioned. But at the time, already half a year before, there was no interest in buying this archive, so Valerie could buy it at the cold price, even later after the auction. At that time, the large exhibition City of Women was prepared at the Belvedere. It was already apparent in the auction catalog that this is private archive, which also contains the original handwritten last will of Teresa Fyodorovna Ries. Other parts of this estate include documents, letters, photographs, passports, poems, and her mother's last will and her diary. We were aware of the importance of these documents from the outset and contacted the Wien Museum, where most of her works that are still preserved today are located. After almost a year of intensive further research and discussions, we succeeded in having this case brought before the Municipal Restitution Commission. Today, 3 years later, this provenance research and decision by the Commission is in its third round, and the outcome is still unclear. This is despite the fact that the original handwritten will is clear, is genuine, and that the will is based on a promemoria from 1921, and that the will of Teresa Fyodorovna Ries, as I already said, is very clear. In our opinion, the fact that the last will was found so late and the time can do nothing to restore it does not stand in the way of a just decision. It is a deep need and concern of ours as artists, as women, and simply as human beings that representation and restrification must take place. It is an act of solidarity, of pointing out and making visible. Valerie?
So to get a sense of what this is about, we would like to read the first lines from the last will from 1941. I will read in German because it's written in German. Mein Wille ist, dass nach meinem Ableben die von mir heute in diesem vorliegenden, beim vollen Bewusstsein und ohne Beeinflussung eigenhändig geschriebenem Testament enthaltenen Bestimmungen vollzogen werden. Ich bin aus dem Judentum hervorgegangen. Daher bin ich auch eine Trägerin seines Geistes und seiner Begabungen. Deshalb soll alles das, was ich durch Gottes Gnade geschaffen habe, dem jüdischen Volk gehören. In our search for traces, we also traveled at Lugano, where we were able to locate the grave of Teresa Fyodorovna Ries for the first time in the Jewish cemetery in Lugano. There is no name and no stone. We found documents, were able to dig up her death certificate, can confirm that she was born in Budapest, 1866, and also found her sad and bitter entry from the guest book of the Sisters of St. Birgitta in Lugano. In this house of the Holy Sisters, she found refuge and was able to find a little peace after all the terrible events in Vienna. In order to show her life and all that what she left, we had the opportunity to show the exhibition Un Paradiso Amaro Bitter Paradise in the last few weeks on the occasion of the reopening of the Academy of Fine Arts at Schillerplatz in Vienna, and also on the occasion of 100 years Women at the Academy. An important aim of the exhibition is to create a broad interest to support us in our concerns. As you can imagine, restitution matters are very difficult and complicated. The exhibition also included the first public display of Theresa's last will. It was also great that we were able to show the original witch, an important central work of her. Other works were contemporary interpretations and interpretations by the participating artists. The base of the resulting exhibition is the TFR archive, an archive without a home, because we know that we should find a home for it and to open it for others. This is a central aspect of this artistic research project. Only through engagement does a new space for thoughts, ideas, and their realization emerge.
Yes, the exhibition as a message, a clear message that says we care in sense of the word curare. It is about making visible the research work, the history, and the visibility of forgetting. Artistic work has the potential to go beyond research, as opposed to a purely art scientific approach. Artistic methods of approach emerge. We made an exhibition and showed the film Un Paradiso Amaro Bitter Paradise in the Cinema Burg Kino for the first time. The artistic work confronts oblivion and challenges the present. How not to forget? And what can we learn from it, read from it? How can we show? How to tell the stories that are so important for all of us? How to preserve it for the next generations and to give it to them? How will they view it? Here, for example, the question, what is an adequate form of remembrance of work in relation to Jewish female artists arise? What is being done to give justice from today's perspective? How do we remember, and how can an adequate form of remembrance work can be found in relation to the themes being worked on? All our artists have been part of our team in this artistic research project for a long time. Finally, we would like to mention all the names, as it is not possible for all of them to be present here today. We are from Austria, Russia, Poland, and Jerusalem. The names behind us are Anka Leszniak, Mika Aya Azagi, Sami Nagasaki, Karl Martin Pold, and Judith Agustinovich, as well as Valerie Habsburg, who curated the exhibition, and me. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be happy to talk to you and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna and Valerie, for this presentation, presenting these interesting materials and raising these important questions. So now I have the pleasure to introduce the next presenters, which will be Viktória Bányai and Rita Horváth. Viktória Bányai is historian and senior research fellow at the Institute for Minority Studies and the Center for Social Studies, and an assistant professor at the Hebrew Studies Department at ETHUS University in Budapest. Her research field is Hungarian Jewish history and culture in the pre-modern and modern times. Her publications include History of Jewish Education in Hungary, 1780 to 1850, it's in Hungarian, and she co-authored Jewish Budapest, Monuments, Rights, History. Her current project, on which she has published several articles, examines the experiences of Jewish children in the immediate post-war period Hungary. Rita Horváth is literary scholar and historian, has been a member of the Academic Advisory Committee of the Hadassah Brandeis Institute at Brandeis University since 2010. Her field of research include the history of the Holocaust in Hungary, Holocaust literature, trauma, and literary theory. She was research fellow at, among others, the International Institute for Holocaust Research in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, and also at the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute for Holocaust. Her publications include previously unexplored sources on the Holocaust in Hungary, published in 2007, or Never Asking Why Build, Only Asking Which Tools, Confessional Poetry and the Construction of the Self from 2005. So, Viktória and Rita, the floor is yours. I hope you are with us.
Thank you very much. It's a joint paper, but I will be the only one who read it out, and Vicky will do the PPT. So, the source group that we are introducing consists of 26 drawings created by pupils at the High School for Girls of the Neolog Jewish community of Pest in the late spring and early summer of 1945. Currently, the drawings are in the private collection of a Hungarian Jewish second-generation survivor artist. 12 of the drawings had been exhibited in Budapest in 1991, and some of them were published as illustrations for commemorative journal articles about the Holocaust. Others were shown during Holocaust Memorial Days. Thus, a number of the drawings had been made available to the public on several occasions. However, up until now, no one researched and analyzed the drawings. Our aim in this paper is, therefore, to focus on them, to turn them more from mere picturesque illustrations into the center of attention, the subject matter of the analysis. Much discussed questions in the scholarly literature about the early post-war era are how much and how intensely the members of the surviving communities talked and wrote about their experiences, recorded them, listened to one another's accounts, and in what ways they accomplished this. Moreover, in what ways and to which degree had the child survivors been involved in these activities, and what are the dynamics of the creation of children's testimonies versus adult testimonies. We can see that wherever and whenever the primary aim of rendering testimonies is to document the Holocaust, like in the Degop Testimony Collecting Project, the voices of the child survivors are not prominent in any way. By contrast, schools seem to provide a more natural environment for producing child survivor testimonies through various media, such as writings, drawings, and other mainly artistic activities. In a school setting, however, the adult caretakers their primary aim of producing testimonies was not documentation, but to help the children to deal with their traumatic losses. We need to ask the question then, how school exercises and activities were and could have been ways of dealing with the traumas of the Holocaust, and how the exact documentation of events and experiences of the Holocaust was actually an integral part of the process. Based on the 1944-45 yearbook of the Jewish High School for Girls, we can see that in the framework of numerous subjects and in other ways too, the school aimed at providing the students with many opportunities to write, draw, and speak about their traumas. For example, Judith Jordan's writing entitled Memory from the Labor Camp and Eva Munkácsi's work entitled Escape won the high school's literary competition, and for the maturation exam in German, the students had to write a composition entitled Das Leben ist schwerer geworden. Life has become more and more difficult. The 26 drawings we have is part of the above described effort. The high school could start the 1944-45 school year only in March 1945. In the autumn, only enrollments and supplementary enrollments took place, involving an especially large number of students, as the Jewish girls or girls deemed Jewish by the Hungarian legal system had been banned from the high schools of the state and the city. The school had not been able to use its modern building on Abonyi Street for years, as it was requisitioned for military purposes during the war, and after the liberation, a Russian military hospital was operating in it. On March 13, when teaching commenced, only 2 rooms of the Ort office had been available, but later, still in March, the high school for girls was moved into the building of the Rabbinical Seminary, where the classes of the high school for girls and those of the high school for boys were taught according to a system of alternating morning-afternoon shifts. The school year was very short, as it ended already on July 6, 1945. The yearbook formulated it as follows. During that not quite 4 months, we had only processed those material that were important and relevant for moving forward, end of quote. In addition to that, many students joined later, recovering from illnesses or staying in the countryside as part of relief efforts. Those who went to school for less than 3 months or did not attend school at all would take grade assigning exams in mid-July in order to avoid losing a school year. Mrs. Tibor Klein, born Clara Friedrich, who has kept the drawings for decades, taught drawing and needlework at the Jewish High School for Girls from 1940. During the short school year, she taught 4 classes in 2 different locations. The 26 drawings were created in these 4 classes as compulsory school assignments, since grades had to be assigned in the short school year too. According to today's terminology, the creators of the drawings were 7th and 8th grader girls, most of whom were born in 1932, i.e. they were about 13 years old in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust. The number of girls who earned year-concluding grades indicates that more than 100 girls studied in the 4 classes taught by Mrs. Klein in 1945. Therefore, it is logical to conclude that she has chosen the drawings somehow for keeping. Unfortunately, we do not know her criteria for the selection, and we do not know the drawings not chosen. Still, we can rule out one criterion, the drawing talent of the students. In that school year, one could only receive 3 types of passing grades, 1, 2, and 3, and 1 was the best. About half of the children whose drawings the teacher kept received 1 for drawing at the end of the year, but many received 2 and some even 3. The girls themselves wrote the date on certain drawings, indicating that they created them at the end of May and the beginning of June. The pupils drew the majority of the drawings on the same day in each class, most probably according to their timetables. In addition to the dated drawing, there are 3 undated ones depicting the 1st of May parade. So these could not have been drawn earlier either. On the drawings, which the students themselves dated, at the upper right-hand corner, the girls wrote down the number of their class and also wrote page 1. These formal elements suggest that the drawings could be a part of the portfolio put together for receiving their end-of-the-year grade. The drawings feature memories of war and persecution, as well as experiences of their present, focused on a life returning to an increasing degree of normalcy. The majority of the drawings have titles, which the children themselves gave to their works. Titles about the past include The Siege of Budapest, Aerocross Thugs Are Taking Us, and Deportation. Titles about the present includes After Liberation, The Electric Lights Are On Again, The Tram is Running. 4 works show the past and the present as juxtaposed. The juxtaposition is emphasized either by the title, such as The Past and the Present, or by comments such as "it was like this," "it is like this," added to a drawing entitled "Arrow Cross Man." Indeed, the juxtaposition itself interprets the works so strongly that in all 4 drawings, words are added to clarify the parallel structures of the visual depiction. In total, 12 drawings depict only the past, 10 depicts only the present, and 4 depicts both, creating a parallel structure that by itself creates a mini positive, hopeful narrative. Mainly based on the drawings themselves, we can guess how the teacher's instructions influence the choice of subject matter and the design of the drawings. The aforementioned formal attributes, date, title, name, uniform indication of class, and the layout of the drawings constantly remind us of the fact that the drawings were created in school during lessons. As in case of school assignments under usual circumstances, we even encounter copying. A child copied another's work, producing a less complex version of the other child's work. In the special case of assignments concerning the children's at once collective and personal traumas, copying happens not because there were children who escaped unsketched the recent historical catastrophe, but exactly because some of them did not want to deal with their agonizing and re-traumatizing memories. Some pupils copied in order to complete the assignment as it is necessary in school, but not to let the past resurface. In fact, we can see what happens when the trauma resurfaces. Agnes Blumenthal's drawing shows that she drew twice the same extremely traumatic scene from the past, how Arrow Cross Men herded a group of Jews to the Danube side to massacre them. The creator of the drawing became trapped in the traumatic repetition in a very literal sense. She divided the page like the other children drawing the past and the present side by side, but she ended up drawing the past twice. When the trauma resurfaces so clearly, no binary opposition like past and present can create an encoded positive mini-narrative. Only the cruelty of the Arrow Cross Man and the suffering of the victims exist in a continued and timeless present that is the past. It is especially painful to see that both groups of victims tortured by the cold include little girls like the author of the drawing herself. Considering the issues of gender is especially informative in the case of these drawings created by girls in an emphatically female setting. Now, we want to call attention to only 2 phenomena concerning gender. One is that the vast majority of the drawings depict the past, war scenes, saturation bombing, battles, siege, weapons, and killings, very much like boys do. However, in the majority of the drawings depicting the times after liberation, the portrayed women and girls are wearing emphatically fashionable clothes and beautiful, elegant hair. Clothes and hair shown in detail in the style of fashion magazines and drawings. It radiates from the drawings that this is a source of obvious pleasure belonging to the free and optimistic times. There is only one drawing, that of Eva Gasztonyi, a talented artist, in which fashion rendered in detail is part of the times before liberation. Eva Gasztonyi and those female victims of Budapest just about to be sent on a death march with fashionable clothes and hair. In the drawing entitled Night Robbery, the terror is emphatically gendered. Young male Arrow Cross thugs terrorize young, elegantly dressed women and children. For the last section of our talk, we aim at defining what kind of documents testimonial drawings are. They were not created primarily to document the Holocaust, i.e. to serve as a source of historical research, but to help to deal with the traumatic losses of the children. However, we can observe that the depicted facts and details of the drawings whenever we can check them, are surprisingly accurate and informative. Just think about Eva Gasztonyi's drawing of the Tattersál, one of the central places of the history of the Holocaust in Budapest, or pay attention to the fact that Erzsébet Armut found it important to record the exact place and title of the first theater production in Budapest after the liberation. The children thus took on the responsibility of recording crucial details exactly, by which they turned their work into reliable sources for historical research. Most probably, one of the reasons for this phenomenon has to do with the public and communal nature of large-scale social historical traumas. In addition to that, it seems that interpreting and facing massive historical traumas merely in order to continue to survive necessitates the depiction of past reality accurately in an especially exact and detailed way. Now, we want to demonstrate how the drawings, in addition to depicting crucial and exact details of the Holocaust and its aftermath, also managed to record a fundamental psychological as well as hermeneutic process that is an inevitable part of the experience of being traumatized and which is connected to the need to record facts exactly. Through analyzing Anna Bloom's The Tram is Running, we will examine one of the central features of testimonial works, symbol creation. The drawing is an exact rendering of the tram number 44, exuding a precision of an engineer. We know that the girl who created the drawing grew up to be an engineer, and at the time of creating the drawing, she lived near Tököli Avenue, where the tram number 44 ran. So the number of the tram is a fact. However, she renders it not merely as a fact, but also as a symbol of the traumas experienced in 1944. We know that she employs the number as a symbol because she wrote the numbers 1945 and 1946 on the side of the cars in a way to surround the central number 44. The number of the tram is not written on the side of the cars, and even though 4-digit numbers are written there as the numbers of the cars, it is highly unlikely that the numbers 1945 and 1946 are accurate in this case. These numbers are there to show that the author of the drawing is acutely aware of the fact and makes the audience aware of it, that the number 44 is simultaneously an accurate fact and a symbol. The fictional numbers of 1945 and 1946 are there to interpret number 44, to provide a historical context for it. The traumatized vision of the creator of the drawing is encoded in the central position of the number 44. In the post-war Hungarian culture, the yellow tram was widely seen as a prominent symbol of the revival of the capital of Hungary. Anna Bloom not only draws upon this widely known symbol, but asserts that revival is problematic. The traumas of the year 1944 are and remain at the center year after year. Revival is problematic and has its limits. Therefore, the creator of testimonial drawing recorded facts and also interpreted them through viewing some of them as symbols. In addition to that, many of the girls managed to record the additional process central to the vision of traumatized people. The nightmarish process during which a piece of reality turns in a moment into a meaningful, threatening symbol, a sign of hideous danger for the psyche that experienced massive long-term social historical traumatization. Trauma manifests itself regularly by the sudden experiencing of a fact of one's surrounding as having a special meaning, being a symbol, transporting the traumatized consciousness back into the time of the trauma. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita, for sharing with us this extraordinary material. So now we go to the next presentation and to next presenter, which will be Zsuzsi Flohr, with her presentation titled Rounded Narratives. Zsuzsi Flohr is a Hungarian artist and researcher living and working in Vienna. She's a PhD candidate at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, where she's writing her dissertation on the role and relevance of art in the realm of memory politics, with special reference to the third generation after the Holocaust. She has taught at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna and the University of Fine Arts in Budapest. She presented her work at the Venice Biennale at the Research Pavilion. She also presented at many different several festivals, including the Jerusalem Biennale, the Wiener Festwochen, and the Wien Woche. Zsuzsi, I invite you. The floor is yours. We are looking forward to your presentation.
No, I have to say that the previous presentation was emotionally very demanding, and I'm sorry. Good. But Moses said to the Lord, "Please, O Lord, I have never been a man of words, either in times past or now that you have spoken to your servant. I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue." With these words, I would like to start my paper, Wounded Narratives. This verse is from the book of Exodus, and I'm going to come back to later. I always looked at photographs from the Holocaust period, sometimes even with a magnifying glass, hoping to find faces with familiar features, faces that look like mine. I grew up without any family photos, without any visual documentation of the 100 or so family members who were killed by the Nazis and their Hungarian collaborators. I had no access to their images. I had no access to their stories. My paternal grandfather, who was born in 1912, never spoke to me about how he survived the war, how his two brothers survived the war, how his mother died, or how his sister died. I only knew the bare details of my family history, a few names but no dates, and almost no other details. This became readily apparent when I was talking with a friend about the fate of our families during the Holocaust. How many family members were killed? When were they deported? How did some of them survive? And my friend knew many of the details of his family history, but I realized that I knew next to nothing. This was in 2003. By then, my grandfather had been dead for 10 years, and I only had vague memory, childhood memories, not even a real narrative, about what happened to him and his family during the war. According to a family story, my great-grandmother died of a pulmonary embolism in the Budapest ghetto. My great-aunt, Edith Flohr, was run over by a Soviet truck right after she was liberated in Theresienstadt. To this day, I don't even know if these stories are accurate. I try to reconstruct my family history using databases that were newly available, such as the Yad Vashem victim database, which seemed to provide different information every time I checked in. In 2003, I found Edith Flohr in the database, but I checked again the following year, and her name was gone. In 2018, I visited the Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC, and the archivist informed me that Edith Flohr was deported in June 1944, but it was unclear whether she was deported from Miskolc or Kisvárda. I knew that either was possible because the Flohr family lived at one point in Miskolc, but Edith lived with her husband in Kisvárda. It was also unclear when she was born. One file listed 1907 as her year of birth, the other 1910. The archivist in DC told me that Yad Vashem had probably mixed up the data, so there was no way of knowing for sure. Then she added that Jews from the Hungarian countryside had been deported at such lightning speed that more precise detail was often unavailable. She told me that Edith was likely gassed immediately upon arrival at Auschwitz. Oddly, it never occurred to her that these were two different people. Flohr is such an uncommon name in Hungary that it never occurred to me either. Only in 2020, a year after the Arolsen archive went online, did I realize that there must be two women named Edith Flohr, born 3 years apart, both of them deported from Eastern Hungary. Edith Flohr, born in 1907, was my grandfather's sister, the one, according to family legend, was run over by a Soviet truck in Theresienstadt. As it turns out, the other Edith Flohr, born 1910, was also a relative. She was married to my grandfather's brother. And this Edith Flohr was actually a prisoner in Theresienstadt, as well as in Auschwitz and in Buchenwald, and apparently survived the war. So it seems that the fates of these two Ediths were interwoven in the family narrative, and the two Ediths did, in fact, become one. I find this particularly interesting because the memory of Edith, the sister-in-law, was entirely forgotten. My grandfather's brother never remarried, and he died before I was born. My father, who was born in the 50s, had never even heard of her until I found evidence of her existence. So in my family, like many other Eastern European Jewish families, forgetting is often the rule. I mean forgetting as an active act, as tabooing, not talking about certain things, or giving confusing narratives by hiding certain information. I have always fantasized about discovering a family archive with diaries, photographs, audio and film footages, recordings, and other items that could help me reconstruct my family's past. For example, an Austrian colleague, grandmother spent her retirement years assembling such an archive, interviewing family members, gathering photos, newspaper clippings, and preserving her family's past for future generations. My grandfather, in contrast, spent his retirement years preserving the silence. At some point, I realized that it was too late to reconstruct the facts. There was no family archive, the survivors and eyewitnesses had already died, and the Holocaust databases offered incomplete and sometimes even contradictory evidence. So I interviewed my grandfather's two children, my father and my aunt, both born after the war, and I realized that their knowledge of their father's wartime experience was also incomplete and, at times, contradictory. Instead of reconstructing the past, I decided to reconstruct an object associated with the past. I'm an artist, not a historian, and artists, like scientists, search for new knowledge, experiment with innovative research projects, and explore pressing questions in the context of that debate on memory politics. Art has the capacity of reaching a very diverse and heterogeneous audience in unexpected ways. As artistic approach is like an active agent, it opens up a special space for dialogue, participation, negotiation, and art is a crucial tool in the transformation of raw research materials. With this in mind, I decided to reconstruct an object that featured prominently not only in my childhood memories, but also in the narrative woven by my aunt and my father. And this object was a backpack, though not an ordinary one. Michael, can I ask you to give away the backpacks so you can touch it and see it, all of you? In 1944, my grandfather was deported from Budapest to Bohr, a mining town in Serbia, for forced labor. When he realized that he was going to be deported, he ordered custom-made hiking boots from a shoemaker and a backpack with secret pockets from a tailor. This investment paid off. The hiking boots and the backpack served him well during his time as a forced laborer, enabling him to survive. According to a family legend, he stored sugar cubes in the shoulder straps of the backpack, and he consumed 2 sugar cubes and a liter of water each day on his 500-kilometer walk from Bohr to Budapest. This is how he survived, or at least how I understood it as a child. A decade after the war, my father found these objects, the boots and the backpack, and my grandfather was forced to explain their unique shape and function, and why there were sugar cubes in the shoulder strap. Unfortunately, the objects were eventually lost, and I never saw them myself. Sparked by my desire to fill the gaps in the family memory, I decided to reconstruct the lost backpack, the main protagonist that appeared over and over again in the narratives of my grandfather's survival. But I was alone in this project because neither my aunt nor my father wanted to talk about their father at their own initiative. They were trapped between revisiting memories and keeping silent. I interviewed my father and asked him to draw the backpack from memory. Then I hired a tailor to recreate it on the basis of his drawings and narratives. When it was finished, I showed the backpack to my aunt, who immediately declared that it was pretty but looked nothing like the original. At this point, I realized that my aunt may also have memories of the object. So I sat down with her and repeated the interview that I already conducted with my father. This time, I made a drawing of the backpack on the basis of our conversation, and I asked the same tailor to make another backpack. When I put the 2 backpacks next to each other, one of them custom-made according to my aunt's memories, and the bigger one, the other one according to my father's drawings, the 2 narratives visibly deviated from one another. I started to realize that my aunt's and father's narratives contradicted each other all the time. Indeed, the memory of my grandfather was an ongoing battle between the 2 of them. And this became even more apparent when I interviewed them together and saw the dynamics of the dialogue between them. The process of reconstructing the backpack turned the backpack into a symbol, an object bearing a reconstructed family history. The contradictions and fundamental disagreements between my father and aunt point to a very compelling and problematic aspect of memory work, which is the process of giving voice to muted narrative, in this case to my grandfather, who cannot intervene in telling his story anymore. It was strikingly painful for my father and aunt to tell their stories. So painful, in fact, that it brings to mind the metaphor of wounded tongue, as Sarah Horowitz writes. The Western literary tradition associates the wounded tongue with the feminine, standing for powerlessness in the face of violent forces that seek to violate and silence, distancing women from their stories. In Jewish writing after the Shoah, however, the figure of the wounded tongue recurs most frequently in narratives by and about men. Drawing on this metaphor, I would characterize my father and aunt's stories about their own fathers as wounded narratives. In this context, I would like to return to the biblical verse that I read at the beginning of this talk, and its bearing on the difficulties of speaking, teaching, and narrating. Moses and his sister Miriam each narrate history in their own way, passing on their knowledge And when I listened to my aunt and father, this biblical image often came to mind. In the biblical understanding, both Miriam and Moses are endowed with alternate ways of speaking. Moses described as having a heavy tongue or a slow tongue. Miriam doesn't want to speak in the traditional manner either. During the exodus from Egypt, she teaches the women with music and song. In my story, the narrators also have alternate ways of speaking, but for different reasons. My father unconsciously embellishes and rewrites every story, while my aunt seems to speak through her emotions. My father believes that the stories he has invented are true at the moment, and my aunt believes that she doesn't remember a thing. In line with Horowitz's theory, both tongues are pulled out of shape here, formulating and distorting the story in such a way that some parts will never find a way to narration. And what is remarkable in that the whole time I was interviewing my father and aunt, researching my grandfather's life, and reconstructing his backpack, there was an actual family archive of sorts. Ironically, I found out about it only on the day of my exhibition opening, dealing with my grandfather's life, when my mother casually informed me that she found a folder and placed it on my desk at home. So I got home after the opening and I started reading its contents right away. The folder contained correspondence between my grandfather and the Hungarian State Pension Office. So the family archive turned to be a pension application. It was not assembled in order to preserve the past. It was assembled as a part of an application for government pension, where my grandfather had to argue that his forced laborer years counted as work years, and had to show 20 years after the war how anti-Jewish laws had affected his employment prospects. It doesn't focus on the war years. The war years are simply part of a chronologically that necessary for administrative purposes. It is not part of a wartime narrative. I did, however, glean some new information from this family archive. For example, that Bohr was not his first time in forced labor. He was taken to forced labor earlier in 1940. But in the end, the reconstruction of the backpack provided deeper insights into the family past than the newly discovered documents. So in this process of interviewing these interviews and documents within arts-based research, I want to emphasize the importance of these ghosts of the past and the ghosts of different hidden narratives. As an artistic strategy, this work explores the potential of conjuring up ghosts of the past in order to engage with them in the present. When involved in situations where different histories come up and collide with each other, it is difficult to avoid memory clashes. Taking the concept of wounded narrative seriously implies thinking about how to allow for ghosts to meet and confront one another within the same space, populated by different people in diverse societies with different histories. Thank you.
Maybe 15 minutes of questions. Does that seem reasonable? We're late, but yeah? Okay, so we'll do 15 minutes of questions. So first we'll take from the audience and then maybe move to the online questions. Anybody like to start? Or comments? Yeah? Okay, Ustina.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for those really very fascinating presentations. I have many questions to everyone, but I will limit myself and I will only ask a short question to Rita, who is online. So I was really very interested in the drawings that you presented today, and especially in your interpretations of those very gendered images of women. And I was wondering, could you present another kind of layers of interpretation of those drawings? Could you also tell something about, I don't know, perhaps a willingness to depict a sort of normalcy after the war, or some other things that you noticed in those drawings? Thank you very much.
So you go ahead and answer now.
Vicky, please also unmute yourself, because I'm sorry, I didn't understand exactly the question. That can you please repeat it, because I didn't get it.
Yeah, of course, no worries. I was also wondering what may be other layers of interpretation of some gendered images, of some gendered drawings, the ones that you showed during your presentation. And I was wondering if the concept of normality after the Holocaust in the post-war years could be kind of brought into this discussion also. I hope it seems clear now.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's just a huge question, and yes, there are other layers, and but now I don't know how I could address it in this. I'm sorry. There are many other layers, definitely, and what is even more important, that Vicky has discovered a lot of information about another exhibition of the drawings of the Jewish high school for boys, and there was another exhibition featuring their work, and it would be wonderful to compare from this point of view the drawings, or the paintings in the other case, mostly drawings, but we didn't find the actual drawings yet, but Vicky is working on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have a question for Anna and Valerie. And thanks, first of all, for bringing Theresa Ries back to our attention. And I was struck by the self-portrait that you showed, that was carefully staged and also orchestrated in pose and attire by this artist. And she's wearing a headgear that looks conspicuously like a Catholic bishop's head, but also her costume is highly reminiscent of almost Byzantine costumes from 19th century visual culture. I'm thinking opera here, like 19th century opera. And I was wondering if you had any background information on this self-portrait, the photograph that you showed us, and perhaps also if you had any preliminary thoughts on how this actually ties back to her Jewish self-understanding. Thank you.
And I actually also have a quick question to Valerie and Anna about, I was wondering if you have any idea how this archive ended up in Morocco, I think you said it was, if there's any information about how in the world that happened. Are there any other questions now?
Thank you again for another incredible panel. So I have questions now for Rita. For me, it's striking how much these are similar to the material that I see in Stammbuchs, in those things that are, I think, in my generation, it was still done when people inscribed and some pretty banal pieces of poetry with drawings, where also fashion and even pop culture with Disney images show up. And so I wonder if there are other drawings that are not done in that structured school context to sort of look at how how children drew, but thank you for this incredibly rich interpretation. And I guess it's a sort of cross-archival reading of drawings question. To Zsuzsi, I mean, I would like to actually have a break to just think and feel from through your incredible presentation. Thank you so much. I was struck, just details about this project. One, do you know the fate of the actual original backpack that sort of disappears? I mean, it's disappearing in and of itself, but did someone dispose of it? Was it a sort of a secret disposal? Like, if you could talk about this disappearance or lack of the story surrounding the disappearance. And then I'm struck by your analysis of the conflating lives of two women into one biography. And I think it's one of the patterns of meaningful silence that is a silence and it is not a silence. And again, I can only share that in the case of my family, it was two grandfathers, the actual biological grandfather and the post-war grandfather that became conflated into one life, as it was recalled, to sort of smooth over the death, the loss, and the second marriage. So it resonated with me as an interesting strategy. I never thought about it. I just thought that my family came up with this idea. Thank you very much.
So I was thinking about all of this. I think all of your papers in some fascinating way connect the church for evil and the church, for good and creative in times of evil. And I was like thinking, maybe it's a question to all of you, how to make this productive in a methodological way for Holocaust research. I mean, you even gave us a perspective of like a kind of metaphysical perspective, from the perspective of the scripture, of God. You mentioned grace, you cited from the Bible. So we as Holocaust researchers really tend to redundantly reproduce evil in our research. I mean, this is really inspiring for me. Do you think you can, from your research can stem some kind of productive methodological approach for Holocaust research in general? This is my question to you.
Okay, yeah, we'll answer now.
Could that question be sort of rephrased? This last question. Could you rephrase it, please?
So it may be not a really question for a historian, but the general question is, what can us tell the where examples of good in times of evil you are somehow reproducing in arts, in poetry, and what can they tell us about the way we research the Holocaust? Is it somehow clear for you? Thank you.
Okay, Marianne, you have a question?
Maybe it's a reaction to this, so sorry, just to interrupt, and then you are, the floor is yours. But what I saw in like all of these papers that were presented is actually the unreliability of historical research sometimes, and the position of historians that tend to look at sources differently than artists or literary scholars. So I think it was more a pledge to follow these paths of unreliability, of uncertainty, of multiple choices, of you had the figure of the doppelganger actually, if people conflate and you're not sure if this is the person or if there is another person. So that's something that literary research has a real knowledge on this. So that's something I saw like in all of these papers. So yeah.
Zsuzsi, do you want to start?
Shall I? Yeah.
So thank you for the questions. So I never saw the original backpacks, as I emphasized, and I'm not 100% sure whether my father or my aunt saw them. And so the bigger one, Michael, can I animate you? Thanks. So the bigger one was the first one, following my father. Memories of my grandfather. Obviously, it's big. Then you won't hear me. It's big because this is how a hero myth should be. It has several secret pockets over here. We were trying to put the sugar cubes in it, and some of them are still there. And this little one, which is ridiculously too small, this is how my aunt, who was born in 1956 and definitely never saw the backpack, imagine this. And here we are having the sugar cubes. So I'm sure that they were existing, because when I figured out that my grandfather was taken in 1940 for forced labor, I understood that why he was prepared when he got I don't know what is sasbehívó in English, whatever, that he has to go for forced labor again. And so he wanted to be prepared. He understood that a good boot is the most important thing to survive. I have also drawings of these boots, I hope that we can exchange about it. And the backpack, and he had also a very strong water jacket. But they are all, I think that they are mostly myths. And I was talking and working together a little bit with the historian Tamás Csapody, who is researching Bor in the last decades, and he helped me actually figure it out, following the initial family narrative and my childish, fabricated, also hero myth about my grandfather, what could happen really with him, where he was taken exactly in Bor, which kind of work was he doing, and how he survived. So this is why I'm naming these objects, the original object, as transformed ghosts. And this is why, for me, they are very interesting and important. And shortly about the edit stories, it's also feeding different family narratives, because one side of the family see the Soviets as heroes. Otherwise, I wouldn't sit here. The other side saw them enemies, and that my grandfather's sister, Edith Flohr, was hit by a Soviet truck after the liberation of Theresienstadt, combines everything of this. And then, of course, when I figured out of these archival materials that what could happen, really, that's another story. But yeah, for me it's very interesting. And I think when I'm working on something, I'm trying to involve historians also, and sociologists and researchers, and discuss. We have been discussing all my projects. And because I know that there is always multiple readings, and I'm not taking granted what historian digs out. And I think that these are also informations what we should question most regularly. Yes.
Anybody want to go first? Rita, perhaps. Can you unmute yourself? You're muted.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see the questions in the chat. Just one moment, I have to read them. So maybe someone else for a moment.
Okay. Sorry, my mistake. There wasn't a question for you. For the artist, then the artist pair, Anna and Valerie.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? Can you maybe switch the camera on, because you are the owner and you switched our cameras on, so we cannot switch our cameras and you cannot see us, and we think it's kind of pity.
We're working on that, I think.
Okay.
Okay, so I read the comments, and I think these drawings are extremely informative in that way that the drawings actually very precise as how they describe events of the Holocaust, and they are very precise. They are very good sources and verifiable. So that's different in that respect. And about the backpack, I just wanted to say that this whole story resonates, like Natalia said, resonates extremely deeply with my family stories, for example, and the importance of good shoes and especially good shoes. That's one of the really important motifs of survivor of the stories they give to their children and grandchildren. It's not the object themselves. It's actually what they wanted to, even though if silence ruled, they still wanted to make sure that the description of the objects, why it is important, how you can put sugar cubes into certain places, and what kind of shoes, and those descriptions, even though not enough to create the object, but enough to create something in case when it is needed. And I think that's again a very important layer of those memories and memory work. And thank you very much for the questions. Thank you.
Valerie and Anna?
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for questions, and thank you for this very intense and interesting panel. So I'll jump up to the costume question, if it's okay. So basically, Teresa Fyodorovna Rys spent quite some lifetime, her young years in Russia. And what she's wearing, from my personal perception, is a typical Russian costume. And these hats, which you referred as, I don't remember what you said, but it's a kokoshnik in Russian. And it's a typical female decoration for hair, which comes from the medieval times. And I think Teresa, when you go through the personality of Teresa, she played a lot with visual vocabulary of different cultures and queered them and rebuilt them. And I think for her, in the times of that time, Russian art was very symbolic. And it took a lot of inspiration from fairy tales, folklore, and everything. And she was in connection with this artist there. She also studied there in the art academy. So I think it is connected with as a homage to her years in Russia, because also these pearls, it's a typical jewelry which is used for these sort of costumes. So yes, you're right. It's sort of a Byzantine dress, because Russian Orthodox Church took a lot from Byzantine. But yes, so that would be my answer. That's what we think about it. Thank you. And maybe Valerie can say something about this Monaco auction house. That's...
Yes, we tried several times to find out how this private archive came to Monaco. We found it in the internet only, and it's not allowed for the auction house to give us the name from the seller. So yeah, we can't find out. And I don't know, Anna, should we say something to Frank's question? Or the last one?
Actually, I did not clearly understand it. But
yeah, I have maybe a simple answer for that, where the difference or the new ways are for us as artists. It was the possibility to show her last will in the exhibition, to make it visible for broad publicity, and also to get one step further concerning this restitution process. So it was yes, you can call it an artistic method for us. Hopefully this answers your question a bit.
Okay, thank you. That wraps up this panel. Mariana, do you want to say anything about how long the lunch break should be in light of our lateness? An hour. So what time is it right now? 1:20? So 2:30 then?